you are very bullish on the number of engineers over time increasing as AI gets better.
Humans crave the thing that was built by other humans. The difficulty of creating content that looks credible goes down and down and down as the models get smarter. To do all the advanced stuff, you need to learn how to code.
This trend of companies acquiring the team and kind of leaving the company solo, independent.
I think it's a bad outcome for the startup ecosystem.
A lot of companies very bullish on glasses as a form factor.
The most useful stuff is I'm doing real tangible, economically productive work on my computer. Yeah. Some of the challenge though is there's certain types of content that just don't work well for that form factor.
I actually still think that there's going to be entire internet websites that I don't need to visit in the future.
Ultimately, humans want to be in the driver's seat for a lot of this stuff.
Well, Logan, thanks for joining me today. Thanks for having me at Google. Yeah, so we got a bunch of topics to talk about. I'm excited to talk to you. I wanted to start with Windsurf, the Windsurf acquisition. What does the team bring to DeepMinds? Because they're joining DeepMind directly.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was reflecting on this last night, actually, just about the arc and the pendulum of developer plus AI. And if you look back to 2.5 years ago, the original wow AI product moment was actually GitHub Copilot and bringing AI to developers and seeing the momentum and excitement there. And then there was a whole period where everyone was okay, well, Copilot won all the developer stuff. There's no interesting opportunity anymore. And then obviously in the last year and a half, there's been so much excitement, and it feels like developers are changing the way that they build software and changing the way that, and the world is changing as the way of building software has changed. And I think a bunch of the folks from Windsurf coming to Google is sort of another realization of just how much of an opportunity there is in the developer space, how much opportunity there is to change the way that software is created. And obviously the Windsurf team has done an incredible job. Both the Windsurf folks who came to Google, but also the Windsurf folks who went to Cognition have done a great job of building a product that developers love. And so I'm excited to collaborate with them, I think.
Yeah, I really like Windsurf. And obviously the acquisition, because you took a subset of the team, was really a talent play. No product, no IP, no customers, that all got scooped up by Cognition, as you said. But why wasn't Google interested in the product itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think maybe I don't have the full purview on all the details of the deal, but I think it's a great product. So I personally am a user. I love using Windsurf. We'll continue using it. Actually, it's in my rotation of similar to how everyone switches between all the chat app products. I feel like developers are now doing that as well through all the different IDE products. So I'm excited to see what the Windsurf team cooks up now that they're here at Google as well. It's also fun for me, DeepMind, there's this transition for DeepMind being an organization that did foundational research across science and LLMs inclusive of that and a bunch of other stuff. And now to see them, it feels that DeepMind is taking a real stance that developer stuff matters a lot in addition to science and all the other research work they were doing, which I love as somebody who cares about developers and wants to build developer products and build things that people love. So it's been cool to see more and more people who also love building developer products coming into DeepMind.
Yeah, and by the way, I was sitting outside earlier and Sir Demis just walked right by me. And he's a superstar in my mind. So it was really cool to see that. One more question on the Windsurf. I mean, what do you think more broadly, this trend of companies acquiring the team and kind of leaving the product, leaving the company solo, independent? What do you think about that trend? How does that fare for both founders and obviously early stage employees who may not be acquired in that transition?
Yeah, I think this is it's a special moment in just the arc of where all of the different conflating factors are, from where the technology, where the products are, the sort of the business environment, et cetera. So I think the positive thing to me is that this type of M&A is happening through some capacity. Because I think there's just so many interesting products and stuff being built right now. So I'm bullish in that sense. I think it's a bad outcome for the startup ecosystem, for example, if there's no way to join forces with other companies and there's no path to IPO, there's no path to engaging and building a bigger company. So I'm positive. I'm very bullish on people building AI startups right now. There's just so many great outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to definitely touch on your thoughts about the increasing number of developers in the world with AI, which I agree with. We'll get to that in a second. You think a lot about the next generation of UI experiences with AI, and Google was like way ahead, obviously, with Google Glass many years ago, that kind of interaction layer. So what are your general thoughts on what is the kind of ultimate form factor for an AI assistant for the consumer? Is there an ultimate form factor? Is it going to be a mix of things? Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it will definitely be a mix of things. I think it's been fun to see this like iteration continue as far as like how are people interacting with these models? And I think it was like initially it was chat. I think there's been this huge explosion of audio stuff. I think there's a chance that like all the like asynchronous agents doing things on your behalf, working in the background sort of opens up like an even different paradigm that's not chat, that's not sort of audio based. And I'll be interested to see what that is. I've wanted for a long time in my mind, I can visualize this, and there aren't any products that do this today, but like I just have this like queue on the right-hand side of my screen, which is just like, all of my agents showing me all the actions that they need my approval on or my review on. And I'm just like kind of every once in a while, it's like PRs on GitHub, for example. And you're just like looking through, here are a bunch of possible things that the model might have done that might be useful to me. Maybe they're not useful at all. And I can go through and decide which ones I want to proceed with and otherwise. So I think there's an interesting form factor UI product experience there, which I'm super excited about. I think there's also the chance that like now all the hardware stuff happening of like how as the models have more capability to see things and hear things and also like generate audio and video, et cetera, you kind of want the sort of default visual experience, which is why I think all the glasses stuff is super interesting, because there's like so much, the whole trend right now around like context engineering. It's a context engineering problem. Like the reason vision is so great is because the default is the model then has all the context that you have, which is like the holy grail of actually building a useful AI product is the models having the same context that you have as the human. And the reason that most AI products or a lot of AI products don't work well is because they don't have that context. So it's, I'm excited about it.
Do you wear prescription glasses?
I don't. No.
Do you wear sunglasses?
Every once in a while.
A lot of companies very bullish on glasses as a form factor, as a major form factor for the interaction layer between humans and artificial intelligence. I don't wear prescription glasses. It's hard for me to imagine wearing glasses for extended periods of time during the day. Like, is that kind of your personal natural form factor, or would you imagine something different?
Yeah, there's another version of this, which is like, where does most useful stuff actually happen? It's on a computer screen. So like there's a way that you can sort of short circuit. Like there are certain use cases where like I'm walking around my apartment and I want to be able to like look at something and ask a question. Like, to be honest, I think that is like slightly more nascent of like a value proposition. Like the most useful stuff is I'm doing real tangible, like economically productive work on my computer or on my phone. Like you don't actually need glasses to do that. Like the computer I can already share with a model today, with today's version of the technology, everything that's visible on my screen with my permission. So I think you can sort of get around, because I agree, like everyone's not going to want to wear glasses, or in the very distant future, like prescription, contacts that have AI built into them or something like that. So I think the like straight into the computer screen makes a lot of sense.
You mentioned voice.
Yeah.
Voice, in my mind, is an incredible way to communicate with artificial intelligence, a user experience for humans and AI. Can you share anything about what Google's working on the voice side, and what do you think more generally about voice as the interaction layer?
Yeah, so there's so many different dimensions. Google's doing a ton of stuff in this space, so I'll make a bunch of comments. I think some of the original stuff, Project Astra, created a sort of like a research test bed to like how do we push the frontier of like what does the product and model experience look like when you put it in the hands of people, and like how can that sort of visual first or audio first experience actually feel. And to make that work, you have to do a bunch of really important things in the model. So now the models like natively can understand audio, and that happened with I think that was actually the original Gemini 1.5 models had that sort of native audio understanding capability. But now actually with 2.5, they can also generate audio natively, which is really cool. So that's how you get the very like lifelike sort of human-like conversation interaction, which I think is very interesting for a lot of different use cases. We have an API now that lets developers sort of build that Astra-like experience. I'll make another footnote about, VO with audio. Like, it is the thing that makes it feel very makes it possible and feel natural.
It's the only text to video model that has
this
really
interleaved
high fidelity audio, high fidelity voice.
Yeah,
it's very impressive.
It is very impressive. We just launched it to developers today in the API, which I'm super excited about. So I think we'll see even more interesting products being built around it. I think today it's still the product ecosystem is expanding around some of these models, which is exciting. So I think there's so much stuff happening. What I'm excited about is it's clear that there's a useful experience from an interaction paradigm. It's also clear that that interaction paradigm won't be there's lots of settings where you're not going to go and talk to the model. It is kind of similar to, I think about it actually as a similar experience to chat, where it's very point in time. There's some situations where I want to be able to chat something, or I have a bunch of text, I can copy and paste it in. That's actually the fastest way to interact with the model. There's some cases I was in someone's car and we were looking at the Google Assistant that was built into their car, and those are great examples of you don't actually have the ability to go and click on a bunch of buttons or type things in. So being able to talk to the model is really important. So I think about all these different modalities as meeting people where they are based on the context of the situation that they're in. And I think there's something really interesting where if you can have the models start to understand that situational context and dynamically build the experience to know oh, I'm in a car, I should probably be audio first, or I'm at a desktop, I should probably be very text. I think there's something there where today humans are crafting that version of the experience. And I think in the future, as the models are agentic and sort of more context aware, you can imagine a lot of that just happens by default, which is cool.
Yeah, I think the car is actually one of the primary use cases for voice. It's the time that you really cannot or should not be looking at the
should not be.
Right, so I drove up here from LA with my wife, and we were talking to the AI assistant for a good hour, facilitating interesting conversations, asking questions, learning about different topics. Now I can imagine a situation in which I can actually get work done and task it to go do things on my behalf. Hey, we're going to be up in San Francisco. What are the best restaurants? Okay, book me that at 7 p.m. on Friday. It's just that is such a great place to have that interaction layer in your car.
Some of the challenge though is there's certain types of content, and I'm curious if you felt this as you were going through some of these examples, that just don't work well for that form factor, where it's if the easy example is coding stuff. I can't review code changes in the car because it's just the very fine-grained details matter a lot, and therefore wouldn't be something.
It's going to read you the PR.
Yeah, it's going to read me the PR on 1,000-line code change. Right. It'd taken the entire drive up from LA for it to finish telling me all the things that changed. So it is interesting, and I think that's actually where that the contextual understanding of the model understanding its situation is really helpful, because you could imagine you do actually, a bunch of your PRs finish or something like that, a bunch of your coding agents finish some job for you. They don't tell you that while you're in the car. You wait till you get home, and then this system that you have, this agentic system that's sort of dispatching information to you at the right time, says, oh, now we know you're home, you're at your desktop, this thing finished. If you want to go review it, go look at it then. So you can sort of really intelligent, it's the next layer of intelligence on top of a notification system, as an example.
Yeah, and I can imagine a bunch of use cases that do work really well with voice only in the car, even more so than ones that don't work, like coding.
Yeah.
I think going through my email is a great example. If I can just have an AI assistant tell me what the most important emails I have in my inbox are, how they would reply, and then I can just approve it, that would be an amazing experience. I want to talk about the future of web browsing. I'm sure this is also something you're thinking a lot about because it's the future interaction layer between humans and the internet. There seems with like AI browsers and agentic assistants where you're tasking them to go do things on your behalf, this opportunity for almost a grand decoupling between internet as we know it today. I can see a vision in which humans are not visiting many websites that they're visiting today. Maybe X will be one of those that we continue to, but like, what are your thoughts on that? How do you see the interaction between humans and the internet evolving over time?
Yeah, it's a good question. Part of my core worldview is that a lot, like humans crave the thing that was built by other humans. And there is this like, there is this pendulum where like in some sense, people might try something and then realize that that's actually the case. So it maybe is not like always abundantly clear to us that that's actually what we want. But at the end of the day, like when I look for content on the internet, like getting a good AI summary of something is helpful for a specific set of use cases. And there's a lot of use cases where like actually the AI being able to give me a good summary is nice, but like I care what you think personally. Like I'm not interested in what like, 50, the aggregate perspective of 50 people are. I want to know like the people who I specifically trust, what do they think about this, about a bunch of different topics and situations. So I think that part is not going to go away. Like I think, and that's why like Google search as like a core product and this like core infrastructure for the internet actually makes is like even more valuable in today's AI era, because as the difficulty of creating content that like looks credible goes down and down and down as the models get smarter, the like actual value of authenticity and the value of like having an authoritative perspective that's like well regarded becomes higher. And there's so much more content. So like search is even more important, because like how do you get the right content? Like you don't just want things that like are being AI generated that like aren't grounded in truth and reality and all this other stuff. So it is a really interesting situation. I do think though there are very specific situations, and I think about like deep research as a good example of this. Like it creates entirely new categories of like how people engage with the internet that actually didn't exist before. And I think about this, I was having a conversation actually with somebody from the search team, and I was telling them like I was getting a gift from my girlfriend for our 3-year anniversary, and like somebody who I deeply care about and like love with all my heart and spend a bunch of time like trying to find her the right thing. Like to be candid, the most number of websites that I would ever go visit to like go look for, I was trying to find a piece of jewelry, which I know nothing about jewelry, like was like 20 websites. And the really interesting thing is like I think that tracks across a bunch of different use cases too, where like
Did you end up using deep research?
I didn't, but I think about this where like if the model had gone and done like research of like 500 different web pages, like I was never going to do that. So it's like it's like supplementing and augmenting the sort of searching patterns that humans have. It's not actually replacing this, because I still wanted to be in the driver's. I was like trying to form
would she have thought that maybe detracted from the thoughtfulness of the gift? This is like a very personal question, but I wonder.
I wonder too. I think it's a good question. And that's part of why I was like, I wanted to be in the driver's seat for doing that. And it was helpful to choice. Like, get some insight from, I think when I saw an AI overview when I was doing some of the searches I was doing. But I do think it's like, there's a lot of places where this is like supplemental in addition to the stuff that people are doing, because ultimately humans want to be in the driver's seat for a lot of this stuff, like have agency over our own lives, make the decisions ourselves. But again, there's certain categories where like I wasn't doing that. I've never looked through 500 web pages for anything in my entire life. So like anytime a model or an AI system or deep research does that for me, is like this net new thing that is a user action I would not have taken before. And I think those are the coolest ones to me, is like things that didn't exist before.
There's a very clear use case, at least in my mind, in which if I never had to do it again, I would be very happy. And it seems like agents would be perfect for it. Travel, right? Yeah. Having to go to all of these different airline websites, hotel websites, planning, there's so many nuances to it. And if I didn't have to go to those websites, I always feel like they're rushing me, and I don't know, it's not a great experience across the board. And if I just had an agent to do that for me and to ask me questions to clarify those nuances as I'm booking travel, that seems like a very clear use case for maybe a website that I won't be visiting again in the future.
I think my personal opinion, I'd love to get your reaction to this, is that I think the like AI travel agent is like one of those red herrings where like there are very specific circumstances. If you have like a really multifaceted travel plan where you're going to 7 different countries and you've got 4 different people who are flying in from different places and you're trying to do all of this like very complex coordination, I could buy that like AI would be really helpful. But I think about like, I fly to California way too much, and I think about my like basic default workflow. And it's hard for me for like the 101 travel use case. I have a hard time imagining that AI is going to like make that faster.
It's probably fairly simple for that specific use case, but let's say it takes still 10 minutes. Imagine if you could just tell AI, go book me this. The same one I've been doing for the last year, go book it for me. And instead of 10 minutes, it takes 20 seconds and maybe some confirmation before it actually confirms the flight for you. I think a lot of people in the enterprise world are using executive assistants to book a lot of their travel. So it feels very similar. But you're right, there's like a wide spectrum of complexity of travel. And the more complex seems like a no-brainer for AI. I actually still think that there's going to be an entire category of internet websites that I don't need to visit in the future. It'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. So I want to move on to models becoming systems. This is something that I was excited to talk to you about. You know, when some of these models first rolled out, a lot of people see them and they're just weights, but now we're talking about building a lot of scaffolding around them, whether that's memory, tool use, web browsing. Talk to me about model core capabilities and the gap between that and what has been built on the scaffolding side, and then what your vision is to where the best investment is if you're a startup founder looking to invest in the scaffolding layer.
Yeah, so I think there's two pillars of this. Like on one hand, if you look back over the last 2.5 years of people building AI products and then actually deploying them into production, the models have just historically had a bunch of things that they weren't good at because they were still early on in the development process. And to make them successful in production, you had to build a bunch of scaffolding. And a lot of that scaffolding, guardrails and all this other stuff to help make sure that the models were doing reasonable things on behalf of your users. I talk to more and more companies that are sort of going through this evolution of ripping out a bunch of that scaffolding and really dramatically simplifying the stack in order to make a production AI deployment. And actually Notebook LM is a good example of this. When Notebook LM originally came out, I think it was a 15-step orchestration workflow. And today it's 4 or 5 steps. So they've dramatically reduced the complexity because the models have just gotten so much better and they've learned a bunch of stuff and the technology's improved. Yeah, it's been really cool to see. And so I think that's happening on one hand. And I think on the other hand, part of the way that this is happening is now is being accelerated by reasoning models. So as the reasoning step becomes this core loop of the model, it now has access to tools, and you can imagine before it actually gives you the final answer, it's almost becoming an agent out of the box. It's calling search when it's reasoning. It's spinning up a code execution environment. It's perhaps doing function calling. It's doing all this stuff that today we consider to be an agent. So it is interesting to me that I think that transition is going to happen where what we see as models today truly just end up being agents out of the box.
Noam Brown from OpenAI specifically said scaffolding is essentially going to be eaten as these models continue to get better and better.
The scaffolding frontier moves. This is the interesting thing is I think the previous generation of scaffolding does get sort of eaten as you keep doing this, but then there's new problems. The models can do all these new things that they couldn't do before, spin up a browser and okay, well now I need all this additional scaffolding of what happens when a model has access to a browser, for example. And so I think that scaffolding frontier will continue to move and will always exist because the models will have these emergent capabilities that don't actually work fully perfectly in production. And you need to build a bunch of stuff because people want to put the stuff into production and help their users and all that stuff. So it's interesting.
So if you're a startup founder, you're starting a new company and you're trying to build something, and where does that line begin and where does it end between what the scaffolding should be and what the model capabilities will be? Because if you're building something and the model's going to be capable of it in 6 to 12 months, you shouldn't build there.
Yeah.
So how far out do you go? How far out do you think?
Yeah, I think for people building products, if you need the scaffolding, you should definitely build it in. You should bet on the fact that the models are probably going to be able to do more of this stuff natively, and you perhaps won't need that scaffolding. I think this is the cost of there's obviously a lot of benefits to building an AI right now, but I think the cost of innovation is that you do need to be able to be nimble enough to change on the fly as the models continue to dramatically get better. And I think now with reasoning as a paradigm that continues to scale up so quickly, the scaling laws are gonna, are alive and well in that sense. And there's a new degree of scaling and it's the reasoning capability. So, and I think hopefully we'll have more dimensions of that as well in the future. So it's a great time to be a builder, but I also have a lot of empathy for people who are having to go through the churn of all this new model capability constantly coming out. But I think, and Sam has said this a bunch of times as well, just like betting that the models are going to get better as like a core belief system. Like I agree with that. I think it makes sense. Like, and all of the track record of the last 2.5 years is that the models do just keep getting better. So I don't think there's any good priors to change that worldview yet.
Yeah, I mean, and it seems to be accelerating. Let's continue talking about builders though. Yeah. You are a very bullish on the number of engineers over time increasing as AI gets better, as AI makes each engineer significantly more productive. Like, tell us your reasoning. What is your argument against folks who think no, engineers are going to be out of a job eventually?
It is so interesting to see that worldview, and I think this is part of my bias as somebody who was a software engineer and studied computer science. Like, it depends like how you break it down. I think I'll make 2 points. One is, if you were to distill down like the skill of what you learned from computer science, at least part of what my takeaway is like you learn like how to think and solve problems, and B, you learn to like smash your head against a keyboard 1,000 times in order to get the thing that you want. So there is this like perseverance story that I think about, and maybe this is because I'm bad at programming. This people hopefully won't.
No, systems thinking is incredibly important to learn. So to interrupt for a second, I mean, one of the most important skills I ever learned was to write code. And a few years ago, I would have said to my son, like, yeah, that's just as important to you now. I wasn't sure for a little bit, but now thinking again, I want him to learn systems thinking. I want him to learn that persistence and problem solving. So sorry, continue, please.
No, yeah. And I think, so that's on one hand where like you learn a bunch of like core skills, which I don't think are going to go away. And you could sort of slightly rechange the formulation and like, the keys you're clicking on the keyboard maybe change slightly, but like the idea and the principle is exactly the same. Whether you're using Python or some higher level of abstraction, et cetera. Like I don't actually think the detail matters that much. And then on the other hand, like who can wield these tools most powerfully? And I think there's so many examples where like, and I think about this for vibe coding all the time, like there's definitely cases where you sort of want to take a look under the hood and like sort of really start to make some very fine-tuned tweaks. And like the models can do some of that stuff, but your velocity of being able to do that is significantly less if you actually have no idea. And it takes a lot of like, I talk to a lot of people about this, like it takes a lot of courage as somebody who doesn't know how to code to show up and like actually look at the code and like sort of intuit, maybe I should make that change, or maybe I should ask the model to make this type of change. So it's just this like entirely foreign concept where like actually code is the right thing that you should know how to change, instead of like trying to use the like human intermediary loop. Basically at the end of the day, to do all the advanced stuff, you need to learn how to code. And you could like sprinkle English in there as well, English and code, but like it really is code. And the challenge is most of today's products that are doing this stuff don't bring the users along as they sort of build stuff. And I like the example of this is like, I spend my time vibe coding. What is actually showing up on the screen as I'm sitting there while the model is writing code for me? It's usually nothing useful. And like, I think there's this huge opportunity to like actually educate people and like help bring people along as they're building stuff with AI tools, and not just like do everything for them, but actually like help them, teach them how to fish, or how whatever the expression is. And there's something really interesting there from a product experience. And I think that's what our team is excited about. And like, that's what we're, I think there's this cool opportunity to like bring the next 100 million developers into the developer ecosystem through products like this, by like really thoughtfully exposing the right details and content and education as people are doing, building software.
I like that vision. I like the mission of trying to bring in the next 100 million developers. On that, do you think in the future we're going to see natural language as the source of truth that gets compiled down into code? So I've seen a couple projects that do this, and it's interesting. I just don't know how feasible it is, at least now, maybe a little bit more in the future. But essentially, you have a natural language spec that is tested with actual traditional code. Every single time it compiles down to traditional code, maybe it's a little different, but the output, the functionality is essentially the same because it's tested. Do you think there's something there?
Yeah, it's tough. This is one of the examples of like what I think takes me back to the fundamental belief that people are going to have to learn to code, because like one of the beautiful principles of software is that it's deterministic. And I think if you lose that determinism as you go between this translation layer of like English to code, you can't, if the entire Google search infrastructure was built on a natural language spec, and then every time we wanted to make a change, we recompiled everything and the search experience slightly changed for some millions of people, like that would be horrible. It would be a terrible product experience. Like you don't want that. Like at a certain level, you need to go down and actually control the code. And I think, again, this depends on like, what's your use case for like, for a bunch of vibe coded, like very low stakes products and applications. Sure, I think it'll work really well. And like, it feels just like an advanced form of what prompting is doing today. But for people who are serious and like want to control the experience and have that determinism, I do think it's important for the code to be there.
I think it is possible to have formal proofs detailed enough where like you can literally define down to the pixel what it should look like, but then at that point you're writing code anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I want to talk about VO3.
Yeah.
You just this morning announced something big, literally right before you walked in here. VO3 now available via the API.
Yep.
What is the use case for using an image model via an API? I was trying to figure that out. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. The whole generative media space is super exciting right now. So the TLDR is at I/O we announced VO3 back in May, and you were at I/O. We were there together, right? Yeah. It feels so long. We were literally sitting right over there. Yeah. It feels so long ago, but it was like 2 months ago. We announced VO3. Since then, like tens of millions of videos have been made. Yeah,
it's just fun.
Billions of views across like so many interesting, like the vlog format is like if folks haven't seen
this. Big commercial was made with it, right?
I haven't seen it.
It's got like millions of views. It was like a major brand.
So I think it's clear that like this fusion of audio and video, which was the new innovation with VO3, is native audio included in these videos, really brings it to life and like adds this level of fidelity that you didn't have before. So I'm excited. And I think it also like brings the bar down, the like barrier of entry to be a creator even lower, which is awesome. And I think like similar to what's happening with vibe coding, like it brings the bar down from being like a developer for people who want to create software. I think there will always like, there's this beautiful, as you bring the bar down, it actually like increases the value of being an expert in many ways as well. So like, I don't think it like, if you're the world's best filmmaker, if you're like really talented at doing this stuff, like this doesn't affect you. Like if anything, it could be a tool to help accelerate you. And I think some of the initial work for VO3 actually was like done in conjunction with, and we showed a bunch of this at I/O, Flow, the prop Flow and Whisk, and a bunch of the like creative tools that the labs team built to help artists actually wield these tools in a more powerful way is exciting. And now VO3 and the API means everyone else can go build more creative tools beyond what Google has built for all the different like random edge cases and things like that. So I think it'll be a split between people doing, I guess like lots of like marketing type of content, things like that. And like actually like very personalized versions of this, because like you don't need to spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to do like some like very small ad run that would maybe just target a very small subset of users who have some interest. So I think there's lots of cool stuff there.
Yeah. We talk about this pretty often on our team that in the future, especially when, as you say, AI is going to bring the bar to creativity down, really good taste is going to be more important than ever.
Yeah.
So being an expert at something, being an expert at curating an experience for other humans is going to become just all that more important.
I agree.
Okay.
No, 100% agree. I think this also goes to like the taste and the authenticity and the agency. Taste, authenticity, agency. Yeah. I think those three in the world of AI is it's the superpower.
Yeah, I think a lot about that when I'm thinking about what kind of schools I want my kids to go to. What are they teaching them? I do think about agency in particular.
Yeah.
How do you teach that? And something I'm thinking a lot about.
Yeah, it's hard. One more quick comment on VO3,
Please.
Which is I think it is like to me, I've thought a lot about in the last 2 years, like some of the stuff has like interesting novelty. Like VO2, I was like, it's interesting. It can do videos. Like how like actually useful is that for the world? Like how much value is it going to create? And I think VO3 is the one that's sort of flipped my mindset of like, it's actually very clear that this is going to like create lots of value in the world. I think it's just the like initial step. Like the models are going to keep getting much, like the jump from VO2 to VO3 was massive. Hopefully we'll keep seeing that with like VO3 to VO4 in the future. And we just had Imagine 4, which is our image generation model. So it's like all of progress in this like generative media space, I think people actually forget about, because there's also so much progress on like the mainline LLM models as well. So it is cool to see the progress happening in parallel. And this goes back to my comment about like the scaling law situation. Like, could be that like a lot of that work ends up directly carrying over to the LLMs, and like you get all this really interesting scale because of these like distinct different models.
You and Demis kind of posted on X, hinted at maybe we're going to get some kind of like video game control for VO3. Like what can you share, or what are you excited about if you can't share?
DeepMind released a bunch of research earlier this year showing some of this like world simulation stuff in real time. Really cool. There's
cool.
There's a bunch of like startups doing stuff like this as well.
Did you see that AI Doom demo from like last year?
I don't
Basically,
think so.
they recreated the game Doom from I think in like '94, completely diffusion based. You can actually play it. It was like mind blowing to think that you can prompt your way into a full video game in the future.
Yeah.
I know that's what you guys were hinting at.
It is crazy. I think it's also like a cool world to imagine where like some variant of that technology allows even existing like true like built end-to-end video games to have this sort of like infinite dimensionality, and like even like Minecraft as an example, which like has a pretty large world space. Like it's actually still pretty limited. Like you can't, the size of those like environments that you can build is limited, and it like stops rendering up to a certain point. So you imagine this world where like the maps just keep going, and you sort of get this. Josh Woodward and the Google Labs team talk about this a lot, but this idea of like infinite content repurposing and reshaping, and like new versions of the same content coming to life. Like there's something really interesting there, and I can imagine some of the like world model stuff being another way to make that possible.
Okay. Anything you can share what you're excited about? You mentioned VO4, but what is the next step for VO3? Longer generations, better audio, more use cases, more functionality and flow?
Yeah, I think so. Some of the feedback that we've gotten so far that's top of mind, one of it is like cost. Like people, obviously VO3 is expensive right now. We have a VO3 fast model, which I'm excited about, which is like, I think it's like half the cost or something like that. And that will actually land hopefully in the next few weeks, which will, keep the VO momentum going. And it's actually roughly the same quality, which is awesome. It's like slightly worse in some cases, but generally it's really good. I do think people want longer video generation. It is interesting to like think about like you sort of trade off the controllability in some way when you do that. And I think that's actually my worldview has not been that there's like actual model constraints of not generating longer videos. It's that as you generate longer videos, like if you were to just have the model generate a 10-minute video, the chance that that video is like coherent to what you actually wanted, like the model just needs to make more assumptions about that. So there is something interesting with like, as you like Flow as a creative tool, you can sort of piece together and people are doing this now. I've seen all these like really cool like 90-second videos that people are sharing on X and other places where it's like, it is pretty coherent. It was done in multiple generations because it's like one of the core ways that they do this. And it actually like mimics the sort of way in which humans produce video as well. Like they're not like taping the next Marvel video in like a single shot. It's like many iterations of the same shot that they redo over and over. So there is like some interesting parallel between human video creation and AI video creation, which like it makes sense from my mind right now. Again, eventually I think the models will be able to do more and more, but they need, like similar to coding as an example, I think they need this like video creation harness that like helps them be able to do that, similar to how agents need coding harnesses and all these other things.
Let's keep talking about new models. One of the things you revealed at Google I/O just a couple months ago was the diffusion model.
Yeah.
I've seen one other example of that in the market, super fast. I asked Sundar directly, he's like, yeah, it is super fast, lower quality. Do you think that paradigm, that architecture is going to be the future? Do you think we're going to have multiple architectures, transformers, diffusion, others? Like, what's your take? Is there going to be one architecture to rule them all, or whatever fits the need at the time?
Yeah, so this is the question that we're trying to answer right now, which is why the diffusion model is not more broadly available, is does the diffusion paradigm keep scaling up in the same way that we've seen transformers are able to scale up? So I think, hopefully we'll have an answer to that, and hopefully folks will know from that perspective. But it is very clear that even for some of these like lower quality use cases, which actually for code, that diffusion model actually works really, really well. So you can imagine like the interesting use case is this like generative UI experience where like the model is just like, you don't need a website. You just like, as you click through, it's like dynamically generating all of the different pages on the fly, which seems pretty expensive. You probably wouldn't want to do that at like, million, billion user scale, but it could be a really cool, interesting experience. So I think we'll know more from a research perspective, hopefully soon, whether it scales up. And I'm excited because I think, again, talking to developers, like one of the things that I hear most often is if the models were faster, it makes this iteration loop so much quicker. I think about this for vibe coding all the time. I go and build something. I'm sitting there for like 3 minutes. I'm
90% of the time you're just
twiddling my thumbs, wishing I was doing something else.
Totally.
And so if you can really, decrease the friction to build and the iteration cycle, I think it like keeps people in the flow state a little bit more. So hopefully we'll have more to share soon.
I think speed of the model is underappreciated.
I agree.
People think about quality, obviously, but speed. I put out a poll on the YouTube channel, and it was like speed as a vote against the other qualities of a model. It's like 5%.
Interesting.
It was super interesting. I want to continue on model evolution. It seems like more and more companies are throwing a lot of compute both at pre-training and now more and more at post-training. XAI kind of just released Grok 4, and they said they put equal amount of compute both at pre and post-training. What's your take on that? And how are you thinking about Gemini 3? Is that what's kind of what you guys are working on? Anything you can share there?
Yeah, so I think this goes back to my comment about the degrees and axes of scaling. So historically, you could scale up pre-training, you could scale up post-training, and now we have this new reasoning RL paradigm where you can actually scale that independently. So the exciting thing, and like this was actually the underlying story for Gemini 2.5, which is like why it worked so well, is it was innovation and scaling across all three dimensions in parallel. So it's like pre-training is still working. You can continue to scale pre-training. You can do a bunch of stuff that makes it work better. You can continue to scale post-training, and post-training for like the last year and a half has been like where you're seeing like most of the lowest hanging fruit gains. And then all of a sudden you have RL and this reasoning paradigm, and that is like even easier to scale than the other two, which is why I think folks are throwing so much resources at it. So the exciting thing is that they're all working, and they all there's this interconnection between them, which is like the gains are not linear. So like as pre-training improves 1%, that pre-training improvement is then magnified across post-training, and then exponentially magnified across reasoning. So it matters, like the continuing to scale across all three dimensions matters because of this like effect that the pre-training effect, like base model intelligence has on the other stages of the model. So I think for Google, we're continuing to invest in all three of those, which is important because you get the multiplication effect, which is awesome.
Yeah, you're good at not giving me anything about Gemini 3.
Well, I mean, Gemini 3 stuff is, Gemini 3 will be exciting. So
I'm sure.
What would you want from Gemini 3? I'm curious.
Faster speed, although Gemini 2.5 is very, very fast already.
Yeah, I think 2.5 Flash is the fastest token per second model available from like the like proprietary model market.
Yeah, I'm referring to Pro, but certainly like Flash is really, really fast. I would like to see maybe specifically for AI Studio, more tools built into it, more ability to like do things without having to code them. I think that would be really cool. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit more though.
Let me know. Send me all the ideas.
Feature requests direct to Logan.
Feature requests that you want.
So I want to finish on competition. Right. So stiff competition. XAI, Anthropic, OpenAI. Sure, there'll be some others soon. Google, famously deep on the research side. But what are the dimensions in which Google is competitive in the market from your view?
I'll make a general comment about competition, which is it's so easy to forget. And there's this like famous quote in the Silicon Valley TV show, and it's like Gavin Belson or something like that. And the comment is around like,
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, it's like, we can't let anyone else make the world a better place. It has to be us. And I love the AI competition like narrative, because at the end of the day, it's a bunch of people who are trying to make the world a better place and solve problems for their customers and do all that stuff. So I, as somebody who is inherently competitive, oftentimes remind myself, and like it's my friends at these companies, and it's like everyone is trying to do something awesome, which I love. And it's great that there's so much investment being put in because it's clear that this technology is going to have such a profound impact on the world. For Google, there's so many interesting dimensions of like where we're doing things that are different than other people. And I think just at the DeepMind organizational level, one of the things that I love is that DeepMind isn't just doing LLMs. Like there's this entire, Demis and John Jumper won the Nobel Prize, not for LLMs and not for Gemini. They won it for some of the other science work that we were doing. And it's been really cool to see the breadth of research that's happening inside of DeepMind trickle back up to make some of those like core models better. And similarly, it's been interesting to see like one of the awesome things that Google has, and also one of the challenging responsibilities that Google has is like, as we build these models, we then distribute them to billions and billions of users around the world through all, like, I think there's like 7+ products with 500 million users, 3 products with billion+ users. So you actually have to make something that works for this like really wide audience of people who in a lot of cases actually don't know, like there's so many people are getting their first AI experience through Google search, and they have no idea what generative AI is. They don't know they don't live in the bubble that we all live in, where we're seeing all this technology. And it's just like a different way of building those products and a different way of like showing up in the world. And yeah, so I think both of those things I think about all the time. I think on the model side, like we have state-of-the-art capabilities in a bunch of different dimensions around like video understanding and multimodal. And I think we made a ton of progress on reasoning and coding, which has been awesome to see.
How about the TPU chipset? That seems like a great differentiator, not having to depend on NVIDIA chips, although I know Google is also using NVIDIA chips, but the fact that you have these dedicated designed chips for AI, like how do you think about that as a differentiator?
I love TPUs. I have two sitting on my
you guys sent me one
nightstand.
I appreciate it. It's awesome.
Those TPUs are awesome. Shout out to JD and Harrison on our team who were able to go and they source these TPUs from around the world from different data centers that were the TPUs are being decommissioned. So very cool. Definitely the coolest keepsake that I've ever gotten from anything. But I do think TPUs are a core differentiator. And I think being able to like control all the way down to the silicon, like how we actually deploy these models, it's super important for Google because again, at the scale that Google's operating for like search as an example, like Gemini is being deployed to 1.5 billion users in search, and like by default is free. Like you're not paying anything for that as well. So you have to be able to like the economies of scale actually matters a lot in order to make sure that the technology can be widely disseminated to people. So yeah, the TPU advantage feels real.
Well, Logan, thank you so much for talking with me today. I appreciate it.
This is awesome. Hopefully we'll get to see each other again before I/O.
Yeah,
next year.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
Gemini 3 maybe.